Hey everyone, this is Brett Wheeless with another episode of the Built on Truth podcast. Today, my guest is David Parker, the John Wick villain himself, the Eminem lookalike himself. What's up, David? How are you? Good to see you. Yeah,
Yes.
welcome on.
Thanks.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about David, DP, where he resides from.
Well, I was born in Miami, and I spent a lot of time there. Then after Hurricane Andrew, spent a year in Georgia, with my grandparents, but mostly time in Florida. And then I went to school for the first time for college at the Air Force Academy in Colorado. Left there, went to FAU for a while, and I swam at both places. And then I eventually joined the Navy and became a SEAL. So that's kind of, and
Yeah,
I just retired. So that's the quick version.
congratulations. All right, so a lot of stuff to unpack there. Tell us about swimming. You used to be quite the swimmer back in the day.
Yeah, it was actually really funny. So my dad was from a little town in Ohio, but he got a scholarship to FAU, a full ride, and he just got us into swimming when we were kids. I could swim before I could walk, and I didn't really enjoy competitive swimming, but I was just really good at it, so it was easy for me to
How tall are you?
6'3".
Okay.
Well,
Long wingspan.
not so much anymore with my spine, maybe 6'2". But yeah, so I was just, and I especially with breaststroke, I was just really good at breaststroke. I ended up being a state champion breaststroker. I think I was like 10th in the nation when I was like a junior in high school or something. And I didn't even go to swim practice that much. And that actually kind of opened my eyes. One, competition kind of made me feel hollow. I was like, but I also was like, especially in high school, um, I was like, some of these kids like don't have a chance, and some of them are trying way harder than I am. And I was, it kind of made me realize like I could try the rest of my life. I'm never gonna be LeBron James at basketball. I'm not even gonna make it to the NBA. It's like I think we like to make competition more fair in our minds than it really is. You know what I mean? But yeah, so that was kind of me, and then I ended up getting partially into the Air Force Academy because I was a swimmer, and I swam there, and then eventually I got a full ride FU when I left the academy. So yeah, but it was more of a means to an end. But it also really partly was when I really started questioning people. And I was like, I don't really understand why people value these things so much, you know?
Competition, winning.
But it's also like, if you were good, you got this value placement on you. It's like, I mean, we worship athletes, right? But they can be, I mean, you think about some of these NFL players or other people that have these terrible, whether it's been rapists or, you know, other things, drug rings, human trafficking, but it's like, oh, but he's really great at football. So, it's like we ignore that aspect of you. And I also found that it was people that were into swimming were more interested in that aspect of me than a person. I just,
Almost collecting you like a
yeah, it was like, that was the whole thing. I mean, the SEAL thing goes the same way, right? Where it's like, there's so much more to a person than this one little thing, right? And that was something I was just naturally good at. So I didn't really, I guess another thing is like, I didn't feel accomplished by doing it. It was just something that was like I was better at than a lot of people, and some people were better at it than me. And it's just like, and a lot of people, like I said, were even putting more effort than I was, especially in high school, where I wouldn't. I, I actually, so my high school coach, because they weren't as competitive, allowed me to train with some of this like private team, right? But since so my coach thought I was swimming with the private team, and my private team thought I was sometimes the coach, I would go surfing a lot and skip practice altogether, right? So, I mean, like I said, I wasn't trying that hard. So, anyway, that's kind of, but it definitely was a means to an end, and it taught me. I mean, definitely, I think the best part about sports now that I look back about, especially for young people, is it does give you purpose. It will give you discipline to some degree. It will help you with your body, and in the world that we have now, especially young men, there's just not a place for exploration, adventure, healthy aggression. So I've kind of changed my tune a little bit, because for a while I was thinking, does this have any purpose at all? But now I think there really is some good things if you can keep it in the right perspective and understand where it is, but don't put it too high. You know what I mean? I think that's like most things in life. But but in America we just worship athletes. Same thing with celebrities. You have this celebrity culture, which again, it's like you saw in this last election. Whatever side you believe in, it was like some of the people that would pull out to talk. Like this girl's a 22-year-old singer. She doesn't know anything about politics, right? And it's clear by what she's saying. It's kind of sad. And she's like, well, not to take anything away from that person, but just like, that's not your expertise. It's not something that, like, I don't talk about heart surgery in an expert way because I'm not a heart surgeon. It's just silly. But we do that all. It's like if someone's a celebrity, it's like they can talk about anything. I saw something recently with this guy called Terrence Howard, and he was talking about like, Terrence Howard math and 1 times 1 is 2, and he got like, it was just like insane. Like he got to talk at Oxford or something, and it was like, instead of someone saying like, you don't, that's not how it works. you know. Uh, anyway, so I think there definitely is something to be said about giving people credit for their effort and what they do and accomplish in their life, but keeping that in context, I think, is just much more important to me, at least.
How do you keep that in context now, being a Christian?
Well, the funny thing is, like before, when I was not a Christian, it didn't make sense to me. But now, as a Christian, it kind of, I do have a context for it, because I just think that it's kind of like talents, right? Everything is God given. I mean, Paul talks about it. It's like, what have you received that you weren't given? And that kind of was in line with what I was thinking. It was like the people that are given these great gifts were given them, and the people that weren't, and they have different talents and different gifts. So, and I think another thing that's probably true that people just don't appreciate is the amount of other people that are required to help anyone be successful. Whether it's your coaches, whether it's the teams, whether it's, I mean, even a scholarship. A scholarship is paid by someone else. I don't know them, right? Same with like taxpayers with SEALs. Like someone else is paying for me to be able to have these opportunities. So I think appreciating all the people in the pyramid of success is important. And I think it's obviously it's easy to, it's same with like leadership, or even pastors. I've noticed in churches sometimes people kind of worship their pastors or put them on a pedestal, and it's like,
It's easy
yeah,
nowadays.
it is very easy, right? And hold them to different standards, which they should to some degree because of what they're doing. But at the end of the day, they're people. But all the people behind the scenes, you know, the sacrifices that their wives make and their kids make and their church makes to give them these opportunities and give them the time and space and the money to be able to be doing what they're doing. So I think it's the body of Christ, for example, right? You talk about the eyes and the ears and the hands. And not everybody can be a hand, and everybody can be the eye, and everybody can be the mouth. So, not forgetting to realize that none of it works without the other parts. And so that's kind of, for me, I think, it's definitely, and some people are kind of built for the limelight and other people aren't, and some people have to be out there, whether it's through evangelism or leadership or if they have an opportunity to be a great athlete, and that's a way for them to share their testimony or share their understanding, just taking advantage of it and sort of, but using it for the right reasons.
Yeah, truly. So going back to your swimming career, so you kind of dinking around, going surfing. Where do you surf in Florida? That's beside the point. But so you swim at Air Force, and then you go swim at FAU,
Yep.
and sounds like it didn't work out. Why didn't it work out at either of those schools?
So, I mean, I actually dropped out of high school too for a while.
Okay.
I did 2 years. I actually made straight A's my sophomore year, and then I dropped out. So big problem for me my whole life. One is I think I actually suffered from childhood depression since probably I was 8 years old.
Yeah.
But I didn't really believe in I didn't know what depression was, and my parents didn't believe in sort of that kind of labels. So I was never treated for it or anything like that. And my parents gave me a lot of freedom. They let me drop out of school, because I was bored and I was uninterested and I was unfulfilled and I was very curious. And so part of this also happened with me with swimming, but with school too. I would achieve something, like I would get straight A's, and I would feel hollow, and I'd feel confused again why people put so much value in this. Or I was a state champion, and then I was like, "What's the point of this?" And so I was very much searching for meaning and for understanding. And part of it too was like, okay, like if I grew up in a different culture, right? I also grew up in Boca Raton. I wasn't going to high school in Boca Raton, and so there was a lot of really wealthy people there, and some people. And this was like, I mean, in high school, I was like late '90s, right? Some of the people had like $200 jeans then. So I mean, that's like I don't even know, $3,000 now, probably. And they drove Porsches in high school, but there was so much value in money. But a lot of the kids I knew, the parents were divorced. Some of the kids were already basically wildly addicted to drugs by the time they were graduating high school. And
Did you ever struggle with drugs? Was that ever?
a little bit later, but I was actually very pure in high school. I had this sort of elitist view on I had to learn the hard way that. But so I didn't smoke. I didn't drink. I looked down on people that did.
Straight A's.
I thought people, because I was like, I wanted to be an athlete. I wanted to be better and stronger. And I also thought that like drinking, it seemed that there was a little bit of this cowardice to drinking where people wouldn't say what they wanted to say or do what they wanted to do without, they would use alcohol as an excuse to be sexually promiscuous or, be wild and fun or dance. And eventually I, did some of those things myself. But when I was young, I was very like, I'm right and the world's wrong. And and everything's black and white, but everybody's all great. But so I definitely, but the long story short, with the academy and FAU and swimming is, I kept trying to find a place that felt like I had meaning and purpose, and I kept doing these things that the world and my parents said that I would feel accomplished by, but I did them and just felt selfish and hollow. I was like, who cares if I'm good at swimming? Like, what does that do for anybody else? Like, I'm going slightly faster than someone else in a pool. And then, towards the end, which again is like, I realize now that that maybe is for some people and it's a great way for them to do it, but I wasn't able to do it in a way that I felt satisfied with, and that's eventually why I joined the teams, because I was hoping that I would be able to do something that was a little more purposeful.
Yeah. So tell me about that. Getting into the team. So you're a phenomenal swimmer, SEAL training was it something you always wanted to do? Was it something on your radar? At what point were you like, this is what I'm gonna?
So I knew about SEALs. I was never really that informed about them, which is funny because, but so I went to the Air Force Academy, and they have combat controllers there, and they have pararescue guys and some other special ops stuff. So my brother ended up being a combat controller, which as an officer side, it's called a STO, Special Tactics Officer. So he was doing special operations stuff. And I was always more just appealed when I was at the academy. Like 50% of the people that graduate are like pilots. But I want to do something, I guess, more adventurous, more risky. I was kind of, I guess, always more kind of risk driven. And I think that was a part of it for me, like athletics or academics. It didn't feel I was putting enough on the line for me, So
It's too easy for you.
Not even too easy, because I don't want to take away from other people's that a lot. There's, like I said, this is kind of a naive view that I had of the world at the time. But I just felt like I needed to put it all on the line, and that's maybe on that edge is where I would find purpose. If I wasn't going all in and really risking it all, then I wasn't able to find meaning or purpose. But yeah, so that's kind of thing what's attracting me. And also, I really, again, kind of going back to the childhood depression, is something that kind of followed me throughout my life. So I would accomplish something, and then I would basically feel empty and numb for a while. So when that thing didn't work, like whatever accomplishment I was chasing, it didn't help. A lot of times I would be like, just kind of devastated a little bit, and being like, what was the point of doing that? And why should I do it again? And I kind of felt like I was on a treadmill at some point where I was just chasing a carrot and looking for something. And then I would listen to a different coach. Like when I dropped out of school, I was kind of exploring one thing. And then when that thing didn't pan out, or this spirituality didn't pan out, or this job didn't pan out, I was like, okay, next, because I was really trying to fill this hole inside me. It's funny, even my buddy, who's another atheist of mine in the teams, we used to call it the God hole, and going back to like a drug thing, when I did start experimenting with drugs, it was the same thing. I was just trying to fill this hole inside me that I couldn't fill with things in the world and experiences. So
it seems to be a theme, talking about all these things with your accomplishments and just constantly feeling empty. And how many folks feel like that inevitably, what solved that problem for you, that emptiness?
Well, it's funny. So there was a point in my life where I got really after I'd been in the teams a while, and the good thing of the teams is, at least for me, with my kind of background and problems, was that it changed all the time. So I wasn't ever really able to feel like, okay, I got this totally and I understand it, and that there's nothing left to learn here. Because that was another thing too. I felt like once I learned the process of, okay, I'm a good swimmer, I'm pretty good, I have a feeling I could get a lot better, I understand the process. And once I understood the process, I kind of understood how to get to the outcome. And even if I couldn't make it all the way to the top, at least I understood I could take it as far as I could go, probably, with this process. And then with the teams, it was like you do all this training to get to buds, and then you go to buds and you go through all that stuff.
How was it? So how was it, buds? Everybody loves to hear the SEAL perspective on buds.
It's so funny to me. I didn't care about buds. Because it was like, it was a test gate, right? It was like, it's like an interview in some ways. Sure, it's 6 months and it sucks, but it was about doing the job. And this is actually something that really kind of, I think, separated quite a few people in the teams. Because some people came in wanting to do buds, and they wanted to challenge buds and go through Hell Week and prove that they could and be part of the crew that made it through buds and became a SEAL. And there are other guys that wanted to be a SEAL and do the job. And so, and that actually kind of separated quite a few guys in buds, because it was like, they were there to be athletes. They were there to, it's kind of like some of the people that get obsessed with like Tough Mudders or marathons. the challenge is great, the endurance is great, pushing themselves. There's all that experience that goes on in buds, but that's not the point. The point was to do the job. And so I was there to do the job. So for me, buds was just kind of an annoying thing that I had to do to make it to the job, you know?
Did you ever want to quit?
You know what's funny? The biggest time I wanted to quit was actually after Hell Week, after first phase. I'm not sure how familiar you are with, but it's basically first phase is the biggest sort of challenge in buds where you go through Hell Week.
4 weeks, 6 weeks.
I think everything's seven ish,
yeah.
you know.
Okay.
It's changed a little bit, but that's where you do all the boats on head stuff there, which again, that's funny. I didn't know that. Have you ever seen videos of guys with the boats on their heads?
Yeah.
I didn't know that it hurt, but like it hurts really bad.
You're a tall guy too.
Yeah, and I have a pencil neck. The wrestlers did great, but yeah, the first time we did it, it was hilarious. Like it sounded like people were getting like it was like pigs getting slaughtered. Like people were screaming. People started quitting like 5 minutes into this like our evolution for like our it was like I forgot what they called it. It was basically like our introduction to boats, and people just started quitting. It was like probably the thing that made people quit the most, besides the cold, probably was the boats on heads. And yeah, it feels like your neck's breaking. And you're like, this is awful. Which actually probably helped me because I just didn't even know. You know what I mean? Like that was so bad. But yeah, so the biggest time I thought about quitting though was actually after Hell Week. I was in second phase, and it started. That's dive training.
Pool, right?
Yeah, pool comp and a bunch of other dive stuff. And I was a swimmer, so a lot of stuff was pretty easy for me, comparatively. And it actually turns out that being a good swimmer is like kind of meaningless for team guys. Like for example, I was an average runner, and so I passed all the runs, but I was never like crushing it, and they kind of sucked, right? But in the runs, for example, like our conditioning runs, you would run, right? And you get to a turnaround point or something. But like the top, like 10 runners would get a break and be able to stretch and drink water. And then like the next 20 guys would be like in another little like semi-decent pool where they're able to kind of like do lights crap. But the guys in the middle and the back, they would get like put in like 7 layers of hell, because they would like have different individual layers for how bad you were. But then, so like the guys who are the worst runners during like the break would be doing like buddy squats. They have their buddies on their back doing squats and push-ups. So they're getting like drained. And then we run back. And the good runners were like resting and drinking water. So it just separated you even worse. But like during swims, like me and my other friend that was mostly my swim buddy, he was an officer and he was a swimmer, and we would, beat most people except for some other good swimmers by a lot. But it's not like in the middle of the turnaround point, they like let you stop and drink Gatorade. Like nobody cared. Like basically they made fun of you were a good swimmer because like there's nobody appreciates being a good swimmer. So I met guys that didn't really know how to swim at all, and they just learned how to swim to train for buds, and they made it through. So yeah, it's not as important. But
yeah.
But back to the thing about quitting, I kind of realized that I was starting to experience a little bit of that hollowness again.
Okay.
Like after I made it through Hell Week, and I was like, because that was like the big thing for so many people. And then I'm like, what am I doing here? It's like, it was a little bit of that. So I was really more struggling, I think, with sort of like, does this matter? And also I think some of the guys I was going through with, and even some of the instructors, I was like, do I look up to these people? Like, is this who I want to be? You know what I mean? And I wasn't sure at that point, I wasn't really sure if this was something for me, but I didn't, so that was like kind of the worst times. I had a couple of times during the Hell Week. I think one time it was like Wednesday night. There was this evolution we were doing, and I forgot what it's called now, but we're just doing surf torture. So you're cold and you're wet, and but you actually get to eat a burrito. It's like they give you burritos. Not that I really want to eat one, and like you get to drink a little Gatorade, and because basically I think if you make it through Wednesday night, it was like statistically by the time you make it, if you make it to Thursday mornings, this is like this massive horrible all night event that like you do. If you make it Thursday morning, you're pretty much guaranteed to make it. Like you have like an 80% chance of making it at that point. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times, if you get hurt at that point, or if you have some other issue, like you get really, really sick, because some guys will get sick and they have, they're puking blood or something. But if you make it past to Thursday morning, you get rolled forward.
Oh, okay.
Versus getting rolled back. Mm. So anyway, it's called Camp Surf. That's what it's called. And I'm sitting there. Some buddy gives me a burrito, and I'm so cold. And then they give me this little styrofoam cup, and they're trying to pour Gator in it. But I'm shaking so bad that I can't hold it still to like get the Gatorade in there, and they just like give you a splash and they walk away. So it's not like, you know. And then I'm trying to get it to my mouth, and I literally shake out all the Gatorade. I was like, just sitting there, just so defeated, like, oh, you know. And that, I think that was like one of my low points. But yeah.
And that so that's
Yeah, it was terrible.
Did you get the burrito?
I ate like a bite. I couldn't eat. I really was actually funny. I wasn't really able to eat much during Hell Week. I know I ate like, they give you MREs the rest of the time. Basically, so you just eat MREs, but I would eat like a few of like the snacks out of it and some of the main stuff. But I really just wasn't able to eat that much. Just, I don't know.
So what was the pool? So it was pool comp, and then you wanted to quit again.
Yeah, I just felt like partly it was some of the instructors, which actually turns out so we had proctors during different stages. It's actually funny. My proctor ended up being one of the guys who transitions. It was like as like to a woman.
He was a man, became a woman.
Yeah, and he was like kind of just a crazy guy, and he was really vindictive and sort of like cruel in a way that wasn't like, I mean, a lot of that is part of the training, but it was like a different kind of, you know, and I could tell the other instructors didn't like him. And that was another thing that I kind of first saw the cracks in the community, where first phase, they were like, you know, all together. And this was kind of like where even the other instructors were basically like, they had struggle, you know, and I realized there was kind of, and I was like, oh man, this maybe isn't as clear as what I thought it was. And there's, you know, a lot of people don't either have these different views and different takes on what it means and what's not means. And so that started being confusing to me. And I was really hoping for like, basically when you really boil it down, I was looking for something that was like true and like to understand, like it's clear, we're here for this purpose. We all agree, like we have a shared purpose and understanding. And once I realized that those cracks were there, again, I started feeling like, I don't know, you know,
this isn't going to be the end all.
This is maybe going to be and again, I think part of it was just being young and naive. Like I just wanted something that made sense, you know? And that wasn't, and I guess I also, like, I didn't want it to be selfish. When you can argue about the nature of altruism all you want, you know, but like for me, I felt like I needed to be doing something that was more than just about me. And I started seeing some like the real another thing was like, I started seeing some of the selfishness of the guys in Buds with me, where, you know, they were basically throwing other people under the bus kind of thing, or they were just so focused on making it themselves, you know, that like during like Hell Week a lot of times, or even under the boat, like when people weren't pulling their own weight, like their own like team of the boat crew would basically kick them out and basically be like wanting to force them to quit because you're like, you're not pulling your own weight, right? Which makes a lot of sense. And this is something else I've really struggled with as I've gotten older, but I kind of understand now there's this tension, and you see it massively in the world today, between empathy and accountability. And so you need both, I think, to have any meaningful relationships and any long-term like organization. And because there's some guys, like one of my buddies ended up having a broken neck, right? During Hell Week. Yeah, in Hell Week. He actually passed out. Like he like went to like we had to do like medical inspections, and then we were allowed to change our clothes every like couple of days because people you have to pee in your pants. A lot of people are pooping in their pants, and you get these horrible sores on your armpits and chafing. And so they just do medical inspections to make sure you're not like dying, essentially, right? But after his medical inspection, instead of going to his changing unit, he like basically went and like fell asleep in the sand, and they had to like stop and look for him. And it turned out that he had like horrible VGE, so he was like throwing up and vomiting, and he and had died, but he ended up having like a fractured spine, right? And fortunately it was after Wednesday, so he got rolled forward. But the point was, like, he was doing boats on heads with a fractured spine, so he gave it all and was going through that amount of pain to keep going, right? We have some other guys who are doing better at that point, or they're better at this particular evolution. It's like some guys are really great at boats on heads, some guys are better at logs, and some guys are better runners or whatever, right? So you have these, and so if everybody just crushes the weakest link at the thing they're doing now, it's like you're kind of taking away. It kind of goes back to this idea of like a team thing. Like there's people need to have strengths that I don't have, right? And so anyway, I just saw how like just dog eat dog it was, and I was like, man, like I'm supposed to trust these guys, like, you know. Anyway, but again, that was kind of but that's where it goes. Like there's a lot to be said about having strong accountability when it comes to organizations or activities and performance. But once the performance breaks down, having the willingness to kind of understand and empathize with the person. And sometimes, like for me, I was a leadership in a position once, and a guy had a bad injury, and I was like, but he wanted to keep going. And I was like, but he was really suffering performance wise. And I was pretty hard on him as long as he was there. And at one point, I'm like, listen, man, like you have to meet the standards, or you have to basically go to medical and like get a timeout and, take some time out, because right now you can't be in a platoon. Like you just can't be part of this platoon to go on a deployment. So,
when you were in the instructor role?
No, I was an LPO, which is
Okay.
like being like, it's called like a lead petty officer. It's more of a term from the, but anyway, so I was kind of in charge of there in the platoon structure. There's only the chief who's like, and then the OIC, which is the officer side of it above me. So I was like kind of like the third guy. They called the triad a little bit, um, but as soon as he was willing to quit, then it's like, hey man, what do you need? Like, let's get you to medical. Like, if you need a timeout, if you can get fixed, you can come back. You know, but there's that. So, but the willingness to do both is hard. Same thing with children. Like, but you see it in the world today where it's just like empathy, empathy, empathy. But I've realized that leads to basically enabling, and you're actually damaging the person at some point if you don't ever try to hold them to some sort of standard, or bring them back to a point where you can, performance matters, and caring matters, but you have to find that
balance.
Yeah.
It's a great point, and especially as a, I'm thinking about all the times, and by nature, the way God has made us, my wife is a lot more caring, a lot more patient, and if you're going to have any sort of enabling,
except when she's not, right?
except when she's not, oh yeah, then we're yeah,
Yeah.
get in line. Yeah, but you have the component of empathy, which is she has a lot more than I do, whereas I'm much more in the performance side. Our kids are 1 and 3; they're not,
Totally.
they're still pooping in diapers, so it's. I mean, but balancing that, you see, I like what you said about that. As far as you don't want to go one way. If you go too far one way, you're enabling them and you're not equipping them. If you go too far the other way, then it's also not good.
Right. You destroy them in a different way.
Yeah.
Because you don't give them a chance to grow. If they make a mistake and you just like, that's it. You get one chance. Like, there's sometimes like with performance standards, like there's test gates, it's fine. But like, as a standard policy, that can't work, because then people will always feel like they're on the chopping block. They don't feel like they have stability, like I said, to take chances, to grow, to think about things, to learn from their mistakes, etc. So, it just either way, I feel like you end up damaging people. But back to the female male thing, which again is such a crazy thing in the world today, right? But the thing about it is, especially with women and men, if you really go back to like these defined roles, it's like it absolutely makes 100% that women, if you think that the average woman in the world, historically has been mostly their main role has been a mother. A baby, zero accountability. Zero accountability. Everything is, what do you need? How can I help you? I have to feed you. I have to change your diaper. I have to carry you. They have zero ability to perform anything, and they will literally die if you don't. Right. And so for a female to have a focus that's empathy based, right? And again, that goes like, and this is where it kind of goes in the spectrum from like zero accountability, 100% empathy, to, getting closer to 100% accountability, especially when it comes to performance and standards, especially with men, like in the world, like, okay, today, like we're on a deployment or something, like we have a job to do. Like, and I think with being a SEAL, it's kind of that's where you get closer and closer to like zero empathy. Cause like, okay, your leg's broken, bro, we got to go. Like, I don't care right now. Nobody cares about your suffering. That's why we're here, right? That's what we do. That's what we offer the world, is a willingness to suffer under extreme conditions and like keep doing something, right, for a goal. So, but again, then being able to toggle that back later is important. But yeah, so back to the female thing. I found this so fascinating that, people take these in different directions and judgments, but it's like, the fact that a woman can do that is, again, I feel like it's 100% designed for her to be able to be a mother and take children from that completely dependent state to where they can start being somewhat independent a little bit, right? And then there's, again, as you build them up, and like, I think the word you use, equip, is probably a great term for that, is like, as you equip them more and more, there are times we're gonna have to hold them more and more accountable, right? And when they whine and when they, they boo-hoo, and you have to be like, no, even though it's breaking your heart on the inside, they have to hold them to that standard so that they can grow and be better, and then and be better people for it, right? I think the Bible says that, like, you hate your children if you don't discipline,
Yep.
And I thought about that a lot when I first read that, and I was like, because I wasn't disciplined. I got to drop out of high school. I could do whatever I want. I was doing all kinds of weird stuff, and my parents just were like, especially my dad, Um, he just is like, oh, you'll figure it out. I love you, Uh,
So where did that discipline come for you, Dave, when you're going through buds? You're going through buds, because it takes an incredible amount, I mean, on the weekends, prepping and all this other stuff, going through the entire pipeline.
yeah, this is again, I think where part of that like talent thing comes in. Like there are things that make obviously being a SEAL easier. Like one, I had some prior experience that really helped. Like one, I was a little bit older. I was like 27 when I went through buds. I'd also gone to the Air Force Academy, so I'd gone through basic training. Um, and even freshman year there in some ways was like a different kind of hard. Um, and so I basically had already had an experience of going through, especially like a boot camp style thing, and then training scenarios where it just sucks for a while, so you just have to get through it. Uh, but the funny thing that probably helped me the most, I didn't take it that seriously. Because I had been through some of these things before. It's kind of like a little bit like high school, or again the Air Force Academy, where freshman year, you're this. They call you like a SMAC, which is like a soldier minus aptitude, courage, and knowledge, right? And you have to run to classes on these like marble strips and this big open courtyard at the Air Force Academy, and any upperclassman can stop you and ask you like knowledge questions, and if you don't answer them, they can make you do push-ups, and you're just getting harassed constantly, right? Um, and but later you realize like it does, like it's a little bit of a game, right? You know what I mean? But and so I just didn't take it. I didn't internalize like some of the instructors, right? I think it's changed quite a bit now because of, I would say, partly the feminization of all things, right? And where empathy has started to destroy the ability for people to be held accountable, and then
Shift.
the performance suffers later for it, right? But um, they used to they would just say cruel things to you on purpose, right? Because they're trying to find your weakness, trying to find your trigger points, trying to, whether it's things about you personally or your family or whatever, they just try to target on. And so, and when they see you reacting to something, right, and a trigger, they'll just, hone in on it and just, dig in to make you, get upset or hurt or have your feelings hurt, etc. Right. So, but for me, I just didn't take it personally. Like it's like they're doing it to everybody. Like, so that helped, I think, a little bit. And again, also for me, like I wasn't focused on buds. I was focused on, I wanted to be a SEAL. So
What about the job were you like, this is why I want to be a SEAL?
I honestly just thought I had always been a little bit attracted to combat. I think as a kid, I was, besides being a swimmer, I was kind of into the idea of, and I think again our community in the world does a terrible job with, like in Hollywood, where it romanticizes certain things like war. I don't know if you've seen the movie The Wolf of Wall Street, where it basically romanticizes this guy who's just a terrible human being who does a bunch of drugs and rips off a bunch of people and cheats on his wife, and you know, and they're like, everybody's like, that guy's awesome, And it's a little bit like that with movies with soldiers too, where you have, I mean, it's kind of like, it's funny. I have a friend, it's a Christian woman who describes like Disney as female porn for young girls, where it's like, because they're a princess and they get the prince, and it warps their mind into this weird fantasy world, right? Whereas I think sometimes actual pornography for men and women now too, unfortunately, it's kind of everywhere, but it warps you into sort of this fantasy world of what you think you should have and what you deserve and what you want, and these weird twisted ways just aren't real. But I think a lot of young action movies or war movies just appealed to something in me that made me want to prove myself. I think another thing too is probably this sense of inadequacy that I was trying. The things that the world said, like, oh, if you swam or you got good grades or you made it into the Air Force Academy or whatever, like you had some value. But I didn't feel that. Inside, I felt, maybe it's like imposter syndrome or something, but it didn't feel like it was enough for me. And so I wanted to, I think, prove myself, um, but also again, it was that idea of like, this is for somebody else, not just me. Because for
something
me,
bigger than yourself.
Because for me, I guess part of this was like, I think it's again like, and this is probably like, and I still haven't totally decided, and I don't think it's that easy to decide one thing. Like, so for example, like depression symptoms, right? I have depression symptoms, but I also found out I had a disease that I was born with that causes mental fatigue and some other things. And I found out way later in the teams, and it's terrible because I was suffering with it and no one knew what was going on with me. But point is that like you have symptoms and you don't necessarily have the root cause, right? And so it's like, and like think about COVID. Some people got COVID and it wasn't a big deal. Some people got COVID and they lost their sense of smell. Somebody got COVID and they died, and then some people can have the same symptoms, but they can have different causes. Some person can have, so there's physiological issues. And so it's really hard for me to say that like what depression is or why I have it or whatever, but the symptoms have been very real for my whole life. It's a sense of disconnected. There's a term called anhedonia. It's like an inability to feel pleasure, right? And some people think it's a chemical imbalance. That's why some of the things that I accomplished were never satisfying for me, because I just didn't have the chemicals to feel reward. There's like rats in cages that they don't, once they do something to their brain, they don't have a reward center anymore. So they just stop. They'll stop eating and they'll literally just starve to death in their cages and so it felt a little like that for me. It felt like I was starving my whole life. And it wasn't worth it for me to stay alive for me. And I think that's another thing too, back to some of these why sports wasn't enough or school wasn't enough. It was like, if my life is going to be in just suffering and dissatisfaction and pain, then I need the value of what I'm doing to be for someone else who can enjoy it, right? So I can suffer, which made and honestly, it was like for me, having depression symptoms was what made being a SEAL sort of easier for me, because like I understood the sort of suffering alone, feeling, helpless, broken, all those things that kind of buds is trying to make you feel like that was kind of a normal thing for me. And so anyway, I needed my pain and my struggle to have value for somebody else, even if it was just a little bit. And I knew that war was, again, going back to the romanticization of war and things like that, I knew that it wasn't this cool story, right? There's real sacrifice. People die, people get hurt. There's a cost to families, and that soldiers aren't these perfect, cool heroes that you see. Not everybody's Rambo or James Bond or whatever, right? It's ugly, and I think war is a failure of humanity, right? Like, what is going on that we have to solve problems by killing each other? It's so that I guess it was actually funny. I think the suffering and the cost is what attracted me to it. Because that was something I felt like I was willing to pay, and it was something I knew how to pay. And it's kind of backwards. A lot of guys like want the different experiences. There were some aspects too where I was always a little bit of an extreme sport guy. Like I like going fast with motorcycles, getting paid to jump out of planes. I got to go to an awesome rally car school, dirt bike school. I got to do all these crazy things that, like, I went to a rally car school with a 10.
What's a rally car?
So have you ever seen rally car personally?
That's for everyone who's listening. I'm thinking Gran Turismo and the rally.
No, you should look up rally car. So basically, it's an off-road tracks, right? But they have a driver and they have a navigator, and they route out the track first. So the navigator has all these turns. They have a code for how they describe it, like sharp turn, increasing, decreasing, like apexes, and all this stuff, right? So basically, this guy is driving, and it's like off-road. Sometimes through very narrow tracks. Sometimes it's in snow, but they end up like flying through the air. They're like ripping off road, and it's just crazy. You should definitely watch some of it because it's wild. But anyway, the guy who did it was a 10-time world champion, right? I got to do a dirt bike school with a guy who was also a world champion. So it's having some of those experiences cool. And I didn't even know when I first went to SEAL team, I didn't even know I was going to have those kind of experiences. But I knew I was going to be able to do some pretty wild stuff when it was outdoor stuff, and doing some, like, I do, like, winter training in Alaska, and climbing snow peaks with snowshoes and digging ice caves. And so I wanted to have those adventures too, I think.
Yeah,
but I needed to be more than just my own, I'm going camping with my buddies thing. So
right, something to have purpose. Yeah. So how was it? Tell me about the day you got pinned. Tell me about the day you got pinned, and then tell me what war was like from your perspective.
So it's so funny. Again, I think so the day I got pinned wasn't that big a deal to me, because I really, again, it was just sort of like
another empty accomplishment.
A little bit of that, yeah. There's a lot of stuff I don't love about the military, like the hype,
dress whites.
Yeah, the dress whites and the people coming and like, it's like, it's so weird too, because it kind of goes back to some of this like worship people have of different titles, because you think about athletes, a lot of people, professional, they're traveling all the time. A lot of these guys, like, I think like there's, I don't know if these statistics are true, but I've heard that like 80% of NFL players end up broke for like after 5 years or something. A lot of them have like major concussions and body issues, and there's quite a high suicide rate, for the athletes, or, these gymnasts that have broken all the bones in their body, all this metal and stuff. So it's like the aftermath, people only focus on the highlights. They see a millionaire, they want to be a millionaire, but they don't see the entrepreneurial struggle where this guy started 3 businesses and failed, and, and maybe he was in bankruptcy, and, his family left him, and eventually he's at this peak, right? Or the guys who go through bugs. Some of these guys were trained since they were like 12 to be SEALs. It's like they sacrificed, so much to train to be here, And people are like, oh, it's so cool. And they're going to sacrifice so much more to do the thing. You know, like some of these athletes, again, still, they're out there working so hard, they're eating, you know, all of it is just such a sacrifice. And so people, they respect the thing, but they don't really understand what it takes to be there. And so it felt hollow. I think other people's appreciation for what other people do always feels like, again, a little bit hollow to me and sort of cheap and one dimensional. So, and I also didn't like, I guess, again, I didn't like I think I really struggled with compliments or positive anything for me.
Truly.
And so the fact that other people thought it was good or they were like congratulating me and thought it was wonderful. And I'm like, it wasn't even so much that I didn't feel like I didn't deserve it, but it was just more of like, I just was like, it just isn't, I don't deserve more congratulations than anyone else. That's what I just felt like to me. They're just, I can do this, you know, and other people can do other things that I can't do. Like, I don't deserve anything for this, you know? And in some ways I feel like, you know, soldiers are an unfortunate necessity of the world that we've lived in and have lived in forever, right? But I wish I didn't, you know, I wish world peace would put me on a job, you know, or it will, you know, like I don't want my job to be necessary, you know? I don't want someone to, you know, have to do the things that I have to do necessarily. So I guess, again, I just didn't really understand or want appreciation at all, you know?
Someone do the job. Yeah.
Yeah, just let me go.
Yeah. So how was it? I know we've talked before briefly, like off camera, as far as your deployments. You went to Iraq.
I went to Afghanistan. So my first deployment was Afghanistan. That was the most combat I ever saw, which is pretty interesting because we actually had to do daylight patrols, and we were allowed to use our suppressors. And for people who don't know what suppressors are, it's what the average people call silencers, but they're this thing that goes on the end of your gun, and it suppresses the sound, but also the flash. So it actually helps people from identifying exactly where you are.
Mm-hmm.
But we weren't allowed to use those, and we weren't allowed to do any operations at night. And
why not?
It was the rules of engagement at the time. So politically, because prior to in Afghanistan, we were doing all these night raids. And in some ways, it was basically like we had too much of an advantage, right? And politically, and, you know, from the powers that be, thought it was a better kind of take. And also, we were trying to win the hearts and minds, right? So it's like, hey, like, we're not going to break in your house at night, because it does affect other people, right? When you take a target, it affects the neighbors, it affects the people in there, maybe their kids, right? So it's not a great look, you know. Anyway, it's like the ICE raids now that people are getting upset about, because it's like, oh my gosh, these people. But you're like, this is what it takes to go into a structure to safely, you know, try to control an environment where you don't, because you never know what you're going into. Somebody can have a suicide vest, somebody can have weapons and shooting you. So, you know, it takes a lot to try to mitigate risk, you know, in unknown circumstances, especially when people are willing to shoot back at you, right? Or actively trying to kill you. So, basically it was that we were trying to minimize the negative sort of political viewpoints of us operating, right? So we had to take on more risk, right? So basically we would walk around sometimes and wait till people started shooting at us. We were not allowed to shoot first, right? So you had to go places and wait till someone shoots first. And it's tough because you're a known entity there, but everyone there, they're not part of, like, it's not like they're part of an army.
They're not like wearing a uniform.
Yeah, so they're not wearing uniforms, right? They're mixed in with civilians. So we'd be around civilian homes and farms and sometimes cities, right? So you're mixed with civilian, and they look just like civilians, right? And sometimes they're armed anyway, because some of the civilians are armed, and they can go from shooting you to throwing their weapon in a wheelbarrow and put some hay on it, and now they're a civilian pretty quick if you don't, you know. So it's a very complex, rough environment. But, you know, again, it goes back to kind of like, for me, I feel like this is where war wasn't, it was in some ways a little bit like I expected, you know, like in some ways where, and I really felt prepared for it, you know. I think, and you know, surprising, some of our training really does work, despite the fact that, you know, it's, when you're doing it in training, it's not real. There's the risk isn't there, but, you know, sometimes like being patrolling, and people start shooting at you, you're getting ambushed, right? You're not at your target, but now you're reacting to an environment, right? But the way we shoot, move, and communicate, really is effective to maneuver out of an ambush site or to retake the advantage. Plus, being able to call in air support definitely is a game changer, especially in a place like Afghanistan. So, the war aspect was actually, it was actually really affirming. I feel like, where it was like, wow, we really are able to maneuver in this environment pretty well, you know, despite, because when you do things on your own, you train on, all you see is the mistakes, right? You just see the ways in which we don't feel good enough, or we're not trained as well as we should, or not armed as well as we should, you know. But so that was good. The war part wasn't hard. I think the hardest part for me was being in which I already knew, which is part of like the fog of friction of war, the gray of war. It's like I knew going into it, I wasn't sure where the moral high ground really was. And at some point when you're on the ground, it's like you got to do what you got to do to survive, which is tough sometimes because you're like, I don't know if we're the good guys anymore. Because some people there, especially, was like they're not terrorists. Some people are just defending their part of Afghanistan. Like they're not even part of Afghanistan. They have no relationship to the central government. They just see us as invaders. You know, it's like imagine if a bunch of, you know, special forces landed in some farmland in Texas and started trying to take over parts of Texas. Like a lot of the guys there, like they don't care what the people's reasons are. You know, they're gonna fight back because it's their lane. Like, so that was tough. There definitely are some like we ended up engaging with some like Chechenian guys that were there from like there's all this other thing with all
Chechenian.
yeah, they're just a group of people that it basically what I was trying to say is that there's people that are being paid to be there by other organizations and you know
mercenaries,
mercenaries, but also different political entities that are there in disguise, you know, supporting or arming the locals and propaganda. And so it was really a mixed environment, right? And it wasn't really clear what we were doing was necessarily good for them or America, right? And that's, I think the thing people, they always try to simplify. It's like the thing with like the homeless right now, or the border situation, or educate. None of these complex, or like the Middle East. I always think it's funny. People are like, oh, why can't the Middle East just get along? I'm like, most people I know get divorced. They can't get along with their own wife or their own husband. You know, some children are trying to get emancipated from their parents right now. Like you have a small group of people that you supposedly love, and you guys can't keep it together. And now you want multiple nations with multiple cultures and 1,000 years of bloodshed. Like, look how nasty divorce scores get. Like, you think it's just going to be as simple to solve these multinational problems? Because even like you look at America today, like we're divided.
Yeah.
You know, and our government has checks and balances. Like, you know, we can't just, not everybody can just do what they want. And people internally have struggles too. So you have these internal struggles. You have tiny and smaller bits of struggles within each one of these things. And everybody has their own motivations and goals. And so it's not simple to solve problems, right? And I think war is a bit like experimental surgery where you have to do it because else you're just, you know, in the patient scenario, like you have to do it, they're going to die. Like they're going to die, so you have to do something, right? Or you might as well try something, right? But it may get worse. It may kill them, right? And the outcome may be different than what you hope for, right? And that's what war is. It's just we want things to get better, right? But we have to, at some point, make a stance against certain things, you know, but it creates other problems. You know, it's like the idea that there's no solutions. There's only compromises. And that goes, I think, back to most leadership positions where, again, I think we have this very sad sort of culture in America today where people don't understand consequence, which is partly the design of building a modern society. Where,
too much empathy.
Where you have people that grow up in a place where they're never attacked by wildlife. They hardly experiencing, you know, especially if they have minor medical issues, they have access to modern medication and pain medication. They have access to food. You know, they don't struggle, they don't starve, which is good. You want that in a society. But when the people don't realize that there's like the cost of creating that, you know, all they can see is the people that are creating that environment and the problems they're causing, right? It's like kids with parents. When you're a child, you think your parents if they just let you do what you want, like they have all the money and they have all the freedom, and they have all these choices. But when you're an adult, you realize like being a kid's easier than being a parent, right? Because you have all this responsibility, you have all this uncertainty, like you don't have unlimited resources, you don't have unlimited answers, like you're just doing the best you can in the environment you're with, right? While trying to take care of someone else who doesn't appreciate the things that you're doing and sacrificing for them. So I think when it comes to like leadership, that's another aspect of like I've seen, and this again where it goes back to the kind of the worship versus understanding and empathy, even where it's like for me, sometimes I see leaders or even athletes, and I'm like, I feel like I see the sacrifices they've made to be there, you know, versus the accomplishment necessarily or how valuable it is that they were able to do that. It's like what they've done, you know, to survive, to be in that position, or like leadership, where people who use leadership to serve a purpose and serve a community, they will never be appreciated. They will never be understood, and they will always be judged. And all of their weaknesses are going to be highlighted, and every bit of hypocrisy, whether intentional or unintentional, is going to be highlighted and picked apart, right, by everyone to understand them, right? But when you're actually in a leadership position, a lot of times you don't have the right resources. You certainly don't have, like, you're constantly looking into an uncertain future, trying to solve a problem that you don't have the information to solve, right? And it's not obvious to the people below you that you don't. They just think that you have all the answers and you're just being a jerk when you make a bad decision.
Mm-hmm.
But I found the most interesting thing that I've realized now, which again is, like, let's say we're on a bus trip together, right? And you guys are all in the back, and every time I hit a bump,
you're like, driving the bus.
I'm driving the bus, and you guys are in the back. And every time I hit a bump, you're like, oh, you keep hitting all these bumps, right? But if I'm swerving out of the way of a canyon, right? You're in the back. You never see the canyon. You don't understand. You just feel the bump, right? And that's what it is. So all the major things that good leaders can navigate through, you never experience. I mean, if you're like like shepherding sheep, right? They may be eating grass on the edge of a cliff about to fall off, or they're about to eat some poison, and you're just coming over and pushing away, and they want to go, and you just have to keep.
They're getting mad at you.
You're getting mad. They don't appreciate, like, and so I realized that, I think, kind of going back into leadership or being a man, like, you have to accept the consequence of your choices, and you have to be willing to be alone in those things. And I think own it. And I think that's probably the hardest part of being a good leader, is the willingness to kind of own your choices and understand clearly. Because another thing I think I didn't realize when I was young and I was doing the thing, pointing the finger at the boss, like, I didn't realize that the leaders understood probably more than thought they did. I thought they didn't understand. They weren't being empathetic. They didn't care about me. They didn't care about my problems, versus, like, you want this thing, but I have 1,000 things that I'm dealing with, and I don't necessarily have the time or interest to give you that thing. But two, that thing, like, if I don't swerve out of the way of the cliff that's coming, like, it doesn't matter if you get your snacks on time in the back of the bus. You know what I mean? Like, I have to do this thing, and eventually you'll get your snack, I promise, but it's not going to be when you want it. Like, it's going to be when it's safe to get it. And so anyway, that whole mindset for me has allowed me to, I think, freed me up to not worry so much what people think about me, but to just really own the decisions that I make when I'm in a position of leadership.